It's time for your Low Country real estate market update. It's the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Brian is one of the top 1% real estate agents in Charleston. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-345-1273. Now, broadcasting from the WTMA studios, here's your host, Brian Beatty.
Good morning. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA. Thank you for joining me. I know it's a little early, but we talk all things real estate here on this program, the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. And this Saturday, we are live in the studio. And although we have a lot of material that we would like to get through, the most important thing to us right now is to be able to answer your questions, anything having to do with real estate, finance, mortgages, flood insurance. I'm joined in the studio by Andrew Muller of Mappus Insurance and Bill Sandvig of Movement Mortgage. So we've got the trifecta again for you this morning. Want to answer any questions you have. The phone number here is 843-556-1250. 556-1250. I am your host, Brian Beatty. If you'd like more information on what I do during the week, which is selling real estate, feel free to visit my website, listingsincharleston.com, where you can search the MLS, read some testimonials from past clients, take a look at properties I have on the market and have sold, and of course, learn more about my 59-day home sale guarantee at 4.5% commission. How you guys doing this morning?
Oh, well, I'm doing great this morning, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Very good, Brian. Good to be back.
Good. A lot of really good stuff happened this week. I'm going to talk a little bit first about just the market overall, kind of give you guys some reactions to the market, both from buyers, sellers, and investors as our market starts to heat up. Again, if you have questions, anything real estate related, 556-1250 before I kind of get into my rant here. But just kind of as a start, here's what I'm seeing right now. Typically what happens around this time of year is people really start to research real estate. They start looking at everything online. They start to make some property inquiries. They start driving around, researching neighborhoods and areas. Sellers are taking flyers out of their neighbors' flyer boxes. I know you've done it before if you're listening, trying to find out how much properties are worth in their area. There's just a lot of activity right now. And I was on yesterday morning on the Terra Show at 7:45, just kind of giving you guys a brief idea of what's going on. So I want to expand on that. We don't usually see this level of activity until April. May is really when our market is in full swing. But I looked at some numbers a little earlier this week, and over the past 60 days, I have generated over 30,000 clicks from interested people online on my listings. And that is an astounding number. That is much more than usual this time of year. If you look at the past 12 months, I've generated 250,000 clicks on my properties, which is it's an astronomical number. When I sit down and I talk with sellers about the level of activity that I'm able to generate for them online and through different marketing mediums, usually it's quite a bit above what other agents are doing. And that's brought both myself and my clients success as I'm able to kind of produce this level of activity. But what we're seeing right now is creative opportunities for buyers that are just about ready to enter the market and sellers that are just about ready to enter the market. There's an opportunity for us to match those people up. So I want to tell you just a quick story. I have a good friend from college that obviously won't name names, but if you're listening, obviously you know who you are. He had a very specific set of criteria in downtown Charleston, and he said that if I can find that for him, that he'd buy something. So in speaking with sellers, in just receiving all of these leads over the past 60 days, I spoke with a guy in downtown Charleston that has a duplex, and it just works out perfectly. So we engaged in conversation. We actually went over there yesterday, and we made an offer. So here we are. We've got a buyer that's able to potentially purchase something and a seller that's potentially able to sell something, both at a very fair price to both parties, accomplishes both clients' goals. And it's great to be able to do that. And if I look back at where I was 12 to 18 months ago, just as a single agent, I have grown my business because there's business out there and there are people that want my help and want the services that I offer. I now have 7 people on my team. So you kind of take my approach to this market and this prospecting that I do every day, because all real estate agents are in 2 businesses. They're in the businesses of helping people and they're in the business of finding people. And I'd like to think that I do both well. But in finding people, because that's what's happening right now, we're trying to catch all the apples as they fall out of the tree. We have some buyers that just can't find inventory. And there are a few areas that just need inventory. If you're considering selling your home in the old village, I don't have one. I have 4 buyers between $500,000 and $1 million that would they would make you an offer today if you raised your hand and said that you were going to sell. Mm-hmm. Same thing with oceanfront condos and oceanfront property. There's just a lack of it. What's been on the market's been there for years. Their price is still unrealistic, and it's going to stay there. West Ashley, between 200 and 400,000, have multiple buyers right now looking in those areas. Somerville, we've got several people in Somerville that are looking right now. So we have buyers. We also have sellers that are getting ready to list. In fact, looking at the numbers, I think we're going to list over 20 properties this month, which is that's obviously more than normal. But if you're considering buying or selling, please reach out to me. We might have an immediate solution for you. My website, www.listingsincharleston.com, or you can call or text me, 843-345-1273. So that's kind of where we are right now. Again, if you have anything specific that you'd like to talk about, give us a call here in the studio. We've got a mortgage guy, an insurance guy, and of course me, the real estate agent. Phone number here is 843-556-1250. We had some huge news this week. We've been talking about flood insurance on this program for 9 months now. I've at some point, maybe I'll just get into the insurance industry because I feel like I know so much about it. But then again, that's why I have great folks on my team like Andrew Muller of Mappus Insurance to help my clients and help me better understand the climate in this market. And I want to dedicate an entire segment to this because it is so important. We've had a lot of questions, a lot of misunderstandings, and frankly, just a lot of misinformation out there, both by agents and buyers and sellers and even insurance agents. So I want to get into that, but you guys really need to stick around for a little later on in this program and listen to what has happened with flood insurance and how it affects you and how it affects our market. So that will be coming up next. What I wanted to do now, unless anybody has any questions or anything they want to talk real estate on, 843-556-1250, is just kind of give you the general overview of what has happened in the Tri-County area, broken down by county, since the end of February. We typically receive numbers toward the middle of each month for the month prior. So just wanted to give you a quick update on what's going on in Berkeley County, Charleston County, and Dorchester County so that you guys have some of that information. So here's what's happening. In 2012, 2013, and 2014, we had more listings hit the market than the year prior. So for the past 3 years in a row in Berkeley County, we have had more new listings than the year prior. But we've also had more closings than the year prior. So what's happening is the net effect on overall inventory is that the inventory is still reducing. So we look at, I think agents like to focus on one specific thing and they think that that's what's happening in the market. You really need to have a holistic approach and view, a macro view of what's going on in that county so that when you sit down with a buyer or a seller, you can accurately map out that trend and help them make informed decisions and determine whether or not you can actually achieve their goal. So here's what else happened in Berkeley County. Closed sales for single-family homes were up 23%. Closings for single-family attached homes, condos, and townhouses were down a little bit. But the median sales price for single-family homes was up 16%. That's pretty huge. Let's move over to Dorchester County. Dorchester County has had a 5% increase in new listings this year versus last. Closed sales in Dorchester County, this is actually the only county that has had a decrease in sales. And I will say that is due really we've had a bad winter. And in Charleston, once it dips down below 55 degrees, people put their jackets on and their scarves and they hibernate. So there were just, not a lot of people that wanted to get out and look at real estate. So they just kind of pushed it off to next month. Or if they were in the north and they had it even worse than us, they literally couldn't because they were stuck. So I think that had an effect on what happened in our market. But sales were down about 10%. However, if you look at the overall net adjustment to inventory was down 13% in Dorchester County. Again, we're talking about just the Tri-County area. If you have a question real estate related, give us a call. We're here in the studio, 843-556-1250. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Continuing on with Dorchester County's numbers, closed sales, again, they were down, but the median sales price was up 16% for single-family detached homes, and they were up 35% for condos and townhouses. And what I want to say about the average sales price or the median sales price or however you want to choose to calculate those numbers is that does not mean that properties appreciated in value by 16% or by 33%. What I mean by that is, let's say that there were two $1 million homes that sold in a category of 50 where the average sales price in Dorchester County for a single-family home is $180,000, that's going to skew the numbers. So I will always say that although these numbers are great to go through so you guys have an idea of the level of activity out there, real estate is local. It is hyper-local. It is neighborhood-specific. So, again, if you have questions, 843-556-1250. That's the phone number here. We are live in the studio. Let's talk about Charleston County lastly. We had about a 5.5% increase in new listings. Closed sales were up 13%. And overall, the inventory was down 10%. Almost the entire Charleston County area is in a seller's market right now. We are having very serious issues with matching interested buyers up with available inventory. So you look at Mount Pleasant under $1 million, it's a severe seller's market. If you look at it between $400,000 and $600,000 in Mount Pleasant, good luck. I mean, I think the months of inventory is like 3 months of inventory, which that's kind of crazy. The average negotiability on a home in Mount Pleasant, $400,000 to $600,000 is like 1.5%. So hyper competitive market. Again, if you're thinking of selling, listingsincharleston.com is my website. But finishing up with Charleston County, again, closed sales were up 13%. Pricing for single-family homes was up 11%, and pricing for condos was up 13%. So there's your Tri-County update. We're going to talk a little bit more about the market as time progresses. But coming up next, we want to get into the roots of what's going on with flood insurance here. And we're going to have Andrew Muller with Mappus Insurance talk with us about that. We'd like to take your calls. Our number here, 843-556-1250. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker. Join us here in just a few minutes. We'll be right back.
More stimulating talk on real estate matters with Brian Beatty next on 1250 WTMA. WTMA. You're listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com.
Welcome back. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. Thanks for joining us this morning. I am joined in the studio live by Andrew Muller of Mappus Insurance and Bill Sandvig of Movement Mortgage. And we just finished talking about what's going on in our market. I gave you some statistics based on our Tri-County area. If you have any questions real estate related, we would love to take your calls. Of course, we have content that we have available this morning, but we would much rather discuss your real estate needs and try and help somebody this morning. So feel free to give us a call, 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. And if you'd like to reach me, I am a top agent in the area, have been since 2009. My website is www.listingsincharleston.com. If you're thinking about buying or selling a home, or you just have a question that I can answer for you, no obligation required. I'm happy to help in any way I can. Again, that website, listingsincharleston.com. Charleston.com. So, guys, we were talking before we went to break on what's going on in our market and just the overall level of activity that we have right now, and it's kind of through the roof, more so than it typically is this time of year. But there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about before getting into what has happened with flood insurance and the reform that we can expect, and that's new construction. When I look at what has sold in the Tri-County area and what's available in the Tri-County area, Berkeley County, 137 out of 432 homes that have sold so far this year were new construction properties. That's close to 30%. If you look at Charleston County, it's much less. It's about 25%. But Dorchester County, they are leading the way with new construction. And what we're seeing right now is that the available inventory is about the same. I mentioned last show that we have an issue in our market right now, and that is that there are buyers out there that want to buy and they can't find properties, or the properties that they find sell so quickly that they're kind of left with their hands in their pockets. So if you're thinking about selling your home, there are several areas of our market right now that are just hot. So give us a call, 843-556-1250, if we can walk you through that. Or, of course, contact me personally, listingsincharleston.com, which is the best way to do that. And when I look at the new construction that's happening right now, guys, there was an article that came out in Post and Courier a few days ago that said that we are expecting 25,000 new jobs over the next 5 years here in our low country. And we're going to have to do something, not just from the standpoint of building more homes, but creating some infrastructure here to handle that growth. And I think that everybody that listens to this show right now can agree that it's pretty amazing the amount of people that are moving to our area from other markets. Of course, we're going to get the Atlantas, the Charlottes, the Floridas, the Northern Virginias, the so on and so forth. But now we're really kind of gaining steam internationally as this beacon, this incredible place to move to, this incredible place to invest in, this incredible place to retire in. And from a real estate agent's perspective, of course, it's great. And from a lender's perspective, Bill, it's great. What I think a lot of people are missing right now, and this is what I want to kind of segue into, Andrew, is when you invest in a coastal market, there are some things that you really need to know when you're looking at buying, and of course, when you're selling your house. And we had some really big news this week that I want you to get into, Andrew. Before we do that, it might make sense to listen to what Andrew has to say for a few minutes, but if there's anything that we can do to help you out, or if you have questions, we are in the studio, 843-556-1250. Andrew, take it away, my friend.
Absolutely. So we had very, very exciting news from a real estate perspective with flood insurance. Over the past 2 weeks, we had a new bill that was passed in both the House and the Senate that is going to change some of these flood insurance issues that we have going on here in the Low Country. But before that, let's backtrack and let's just update everybody on how we got to where we are today. So the flood insurance program, national program ran by FEMA, has been in effect since about 1978. And it's really been flawed since the beginning. They basically have not been charging adequate rates for the risk associated with each property. And over time, more claims have been paid out than premiums coming in. So we are somewhere between $25 and $35 billion in debt.
Billion with a B.
But I still find it funny, though, because we're somewhere between 25 and 35. We have a $10 billion gap, and we're just not for sure what it is. And I
That's
feel
a
like
great point.
only can the federal government get away with this. But anyway, so back in 2012, Congress quietly passed the Biggert Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that kicked in this past October, which a lot of homeowners, both buyers and sellers, and real estate agents have come to find out. Biggert Waters was an attempt to reform the flood insurance program and to provide financial stability moving forward so the federal government could continue to provide flood insurance. But what happened was that, or in my opinion, I don't think anybody read the bill. before they passed it, because they would not have passed what they passed.
Well, it sounds like it was an overreaction almost to what happened with Hurricane Sandy and just the incredible amount of devastation that it caused, destruction it caused. That's just my perception.
Oh, absolutely. Of that, 25 to 35 billion, somewhere between 10 to 15 billion of that is produced from Sandy. So certainly Sandy had a lot to do with it. It was a big reaction, and there were two big pieces of this bill that everyone knows about. And the first one is when an older property that is receiving subsidized rates is bought or sold, that subsidized rate can no longer be transferred to the new buyer. Now this, Brian, as you're very much aware of, has been causing major issues for buyers, because what was possibly a $1,000 flood insurance premium for a new buyer was going to be, in some cases, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000. We had one the other day, $53,000 for flood insurance.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Nope.
And so the second thing that was a part of Biggert Waters that really hasn't been talked about much, because it hasn't affected us here in the Lowcountry at all, and that is with grandfathering. And grandfathering is given to properties that were built after the flood insurance program was initiated for our community, and these homes were built in compliance at the time of construction. But since then, the compliance has changed, and so if you look at it to today's standards, these properties are out of compliance. But since they were built in compliance at the time, they're given these grandfathered rates.
Right.
Well, Biggert Waters said, we're going to remove the grandfathering status. So they're basically telling these homeowners, yes, you complied with the law, you built your house to compliance at the time, but we're going to penalize you because you're not in compliance to today's law. And that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's the federal government saying, we're just going to continue to dictate what you're going to pay for flood insurance, and if we need to charge you more, we're going to charge you more. So that was the second big issue. So the big news we're talking about is over the past 2 weeks, both the House and Congress passed an flood insurance affordability bill to take place, or to pretty much repeal those two pieces of legislation from Biggert Waters and to replace them. And grandfathering is not going to be messed with. So they're going to leave grandfathering in place. So that's something that home buyers don't need to worry about anymore. If you were built in compliance, you're safe.
Right.
The other piece, and the most important piece, especially right now here in the Lowcountry, is the transfer of subsidized rates.
Right.
So now a buyer can take over those lower flood insurance premiums from the seller, and that's very important. They will still see increases in their rates. The reform has to happen. We can no longer just accept these low premiums. They have to. They're going to continue to go up. But the biggest thing is that you can now transfer these subsidized policies to the new buyer, and that has been the holdup for so many sales here locally. I mean, we have seen so many just between you and I, and I mean, it's happening every single day. There's tons of them, and in Charleston County alone, there are over 10,000 subsidized policies in effect.
Wow.
And those are only policies. Those are only people that have flood insurance. So if there are a lot of properties out there where there's no flood insurance.
Yeah, they own them outright, and they don't need to have flood insurance.
Exactly. But if they go to sell, that new buyer is still subject to, as of right now, these high astronomical premiums. So that's going to help those properties as well.
So for a buyer who's out there shopping, is it as simple as going out there and asking what the seller is paying for flood insurance?
Absolutely. So you need to get the flood insurance policy that the current owners have in place. You want to see that, what's called the DEC page, the declarations page. You want that, but you're still going to want to get an elevation certificate completed. Okay. Because you're still subject to, at some point in the future, the full risk rates. So you want to see what your full risk could be at some point in the future.
Right.
So you're going to want to do that, and you just got to weigh the options of, okay, this is what we're going to pay now. This is what we could pay in maybe 10 years from now. But it's certainly not the case where you're going to pay that immediately.
Right.
Are the insurance companies requiring that new elevation certificate every single time now, or is that gone? I know.
Well, you don't have to have it as far as taking over the current policy of the seller, but you're going to want to know before you invest into a new property what your risk could be in the future.
Yep. And that, of course, as a real estate agent, that is my job, is to prepare people for things like this. One of the specific questions that I had, Andrew, and you answered it, and let me make sure that I understand this correctly. Sometimes the best way to learn something is to teach it. So if we're looking at a house, and let's say that they're paying $1,000 right now for flood insurance, and 2 weeks ago when their house was on the market and it was under contract, and they learned that a new buyer was going to be paying $5,000 for flood insurance, there was this big gap. It's important to know that as the homeowner or as the buyer of that property, that the flood insurance premium will still increase. However, it will only increase by 15% of the current policy amount per year if it's a primary residence, or 25% per year of the current policy amount if it's a second home. So, simple math. If it's $1,000 flood insurance policy, it's only going to rise $150 a year. At some point, however, it will potentially reach that $5,000 number. Is that correct?
Correct. And, after we spoke about this yesterday, I dug into the new bill a little bit further, and the increase of 15%, it actually could be as little as 5%, or as much as potentially 18%.
Okay.
But so, and we're not exactly for sure what qualifies you for a 5% increase versus a 15% increase, but it could be a 5%.
Right.
And that's $50 a year. So it's going to take you a long time to get to that full risk rate. However, we are starting to see the emergence of the private insurance market. So I don't want people to dwell on the full risk rate,
right?
Because you're never going to pay that.
Yep. And I want to talk about that in our next segment. We're going to take a little bit of a break here. I know you guys have questions about this. It has affected a lot of us here in the Low Country, and it has certainly affected my business and my clients. And when you're doing 125 deals or so a year, you're going to run into these issues. So we want to help navigate you through them. Give us a call here in the studio, and we would love an opportunity to take your questions and help guide you down the right path. My number here in the studio, 843-556-1250. You're listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA. We'll be right back.
Have a real estate question? Ask Brian Beatty. Send him an email, lowcountryhomesales@gmail.com. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show is on 1250 WTMA.
1250 WTMA.
Now, the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues on Charleston's Big Talker, 1250 WTMA.
Good morning. You're listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker. We have covered a lot of material this morning. We are live in the studio. I'm your host, Brian Beatty. I'm joined this morning by Andrew Muller of Mappus Insurance and Bill Sandvig of Movement Mortgage. And we would love to take your calls this morning. Our number here in the studio, 843-556-1250. So far this morning, we've kind of given an overall update on what's going on in our market. And we just, before we took the break, we're talking about flood insurance and the major impact that's going to have on our market, on our area, and of course, any other coastal area here in our country. But if you have if you have a question, anything real estate related, you've got a general mortgage question, anything insurance related, anything real estate related, give us a call, 843-556-1250. And again, if you'd like to reach out to me personally and you're considering buying or selling a home, please visit my website, www.listingsincharleston.com. You can search the MLS, read some testimonials from past clients, take a look at everything I have for sale and have sold, and learn more about my 59-day home sale guarantee at 4.5% commission. So again, that website, www.listingsincharleston.com. So just a quick recap. The Senate passed the House's version of, did I get that? The Senate passed the House's version, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Senate passed the House's version of a flood reform bill that really kind of handles some of the major issues we're dealing with in flood insurance in this market, and the Biggert Waters Act, which has really kind of ruined a lot of deals for a lot of people. So again, just hit the very quick bullet points on that for anybody just joining the show. And then I kind of want to segue into something else. And of course, unless you guys have questions, 556-1250.
Sure. So the two major pieces of legislation that were changed in the Flood Insurance Affordability Act, it's HR 3370 if anybody wants to look it up on Google. The biggest thing is that subsidized rates that a seller would currently be paying for their flood insurance premiums can now be transferred to the buyer of their property. Before, Biggert Waters said you can no longer transfer these rates and you have to go to the full risk rate, and this was causing extreme increases in flood insurance premiums. We have seen everything across the board from $1,000 to $5,000, $2,500 to $53,000 in one case. Mm-hmm. And so these sales were not going through.
Unfortunately, my seller was that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second piece is that they removed the removal of grandfathering. So properties that were built in compliance at the time are not going to be penalized by changing their rates to say, hey, you're not compliant with today's standards, so we're going to penalize you. So that's been removed. So if your house was built in compliant at the time, you are safe. So those are the two big pieces of this legislation. Now, certainly this bill still has to be signed into law by President Obama. We feel pretty confident he's going to do this, but it still has to be done.
Right. The way I look at this is I see this as a positive because we know that FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Program is in debt somewhere to the tune of $25 to $35 billion. And what's going to happen is that as rates increase gradually over time, which, it's not going to be a drastic increase for anybody at this point, which I think was the original intent of Biggert Waters. They just totally missed the mark with the implementation of that bill.
Correct.
And what's going to happen is that you're going to start to see the private sector emerge as insuring flood insurance premiums. And of course, as time progresses, as rates start to increase a little bit, you're going to see the private sector enter that market and create some competition that will then allow for us to kind of get away from relying on our government to provide us with flood insurance and sub it out to the private sector, create some jobs, create more wealth for people. I mean, I see it as a positive.
When we were talking in the past, it was a requirement. If you were in a flood zone, you needed an elevation certificate. I think it's important that buyers know you should still go get that elevation certificate, even if you don't have to have it. Right. Because you need to know what you're exposed to.
Absolutely. Correct? Absolutely. We've got a caller, Jane in Mount Pleasant, wants to talk about flood insurance. Jane, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hey there.
Is FEMA the agency that pays our flood insurance repairs? I mean, are they the ones responsible?
Okay, so flood insurance, in the end, it is paid for by the National Flood Insurance Program, which is ran by FEMA. Okay. But you have what are called write your own companies. And so you might see on your insurance policy that Nationwide Insurance is actually the policy holder or the insurance company on your flood policy. So there are servicing insurance companies that will service and actually send their adjusters out and pay the claims, and then they get reimbursed by the National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to share something. I just got back from Mardi Gras, and there was an article in one of their magazines that said FEMA had just paid in a grant $1.3 million to repair a fountain this past year in New Orleans.
Wow.
And I just thought...
And that was flood insurance related?
I don't know. It said FEMA. That's why I wanted to know.
Okay.
So
it probably was not a part of the flood insurance program. FEMA,
community outreach, or
FEMA's involved in a lot of various programs out there to help rebuild and repair communities. I don't know. It doesn't sound like it was part of flood insurance, but you never know.
Okay. All right. Well, that's what. Now I feel better. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you for calling.
All right. Bye.
That's awesome. My dad was at Mardi Gras, and one of his friends was the king of Mardi Gras this year. And I was like, Dad, you're 61 years old. What are you doing at Mardi Gras? It was funny. Well, I tell you what, let's take a break and then come back, because I want to get into negotiating contracts for purchase right now in this market, because it's a highly competitive market for buyers. And Bill, we're going to talk with you about that. Bill Sandvig of Movement Mortgage. Before we take the break, if you want to call in, 843-556-1250 is the phone number here. We'd love to answer any questions you have. Stick with us. You're listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA.
Find Brian Beatty online at listingsincharleston.com. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues next on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. Expert news and views on the Lowcountry real estate scene. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are live in the studio. I am joined by Andrew Muller of Mappus Insurance and Bill Sandvig of Movement Mortgage. And we would love the opportunity here in the last few minutes of our show to answer any questions you have. We've given you a lot of information this morning about the state of the market, what happened with flood insurance, the big news that is going to positively impact our market. And now I want to talk about working with buyers in a highly competitive seller's market and kind of walk you through those steps so that we can position you for success if you're considering buying a home. Again, the phone number here, 843-556-1250. And if you'd like to reach out to me personally, I have been in the top 1% of agents in our market since 2009 and would love to assist you with your real estate needs. My website is www.listingsincharleston.com, where you can search the MLS, read some testimonials from past clients, take a look at everything I have for sale and have sold, and of course learn more about my 59-day home sale guarantee at 4.5% commission. So Bill, I want to kind of engage you in this final few minutes of our show here about working with buyers in a highly competitive seller's market. We have several across the Tri-County area right now where as soon as a house hits the market, if it's decently priced, if it's in the ballpark, and it's in good condition, it's going to sell almost immediately, which is a very exciting thing for us because, obviously we've had about 12 to 18 months at this point of positive news and positive growth in our market, but there were many, many years where I had to sit down with a seller and say, well, I'm sorry, but you don't have any equity. Have you considered a short sale? And we're moving past that, and that's great. But give me your perspective from a lender on what we can do as a team to position ourselves for success when in a multiple offer situation, let's say.
Yeah, Brian, so multiple offers are becoming more and more common. I mean, every week that goes by, I'm getting more stories about a multiple offer situation. We had one yesterday. Mm-hmm. And so I'm working with buyers all the time, and it crosses my mind, how can we help our buyers, our clients, be in a position to win that deal, win that house that they're looking for? And so I pulled out 4 points that really can make a difference when you're putting in a contract with a buyer to make that person stand out. And there's 4 things that play into it. We have, how much money are you offering? How are you getting the money? How fast can you get me the money? And are there contingencies on that contract?
Right.
So I'm going to go back. So the first one is how much. That's obvious. If you offer more money, your offer looks better. You have a better shot at getting the house. But that's kind of counter to what we want to do for a buyer. They want that house at the best deal that they can get it. So they want to be in a good negotiation position for getting that contract without forking over the maximum dollar amount.
Right. And let me make a quick point to that is that when you work with a lender and you work with an experienced agent and an experienced team, you take a consultative approach to, buying a home in this market. So before we get out there, before we make an offer, we want to know what the payment looks like so that you're comfortable with that. We need to know whether you need to have closing cost coverage or not. We need to know if you're putting down 5, 10, 20, or 50%. All that matters in a multiple offer situation. So taking that time to really, invest just a little bit of time up front with your lender and with your agent so that we're all on the same page is what's going to position you for success.
There has to be a discussion. There has to be a plan going into making that offer. And that's why a full service team is so important, because you need to have that conversation. So we know how much money matters. But the next one is, how are you getting the money? Is it cash or are you getting a loan? So obviously, if you have a cash offer compared to a loan offer, and you're a seller, you like that cash offer better.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot less things that can go wrong with that cash offer. So one of the things that I do, and we do, Brian, is we want to make our borrowers and buyers look as much like a cash buyer as we can. So that might mean, can you put more money down? And we will relay that information to the seller. This borrower is putting down 20%. This borrower is putting down 40%. So the more that we can show them that we're approaching that cash, the more comfortable the seller is going to feel, the more likely you might get that contract compared to another offer. So that's how are you getting the money.
Can I give you a different perspective on that? Because the reason I'm partnered with Movement Mortgage is because you guys do something very unique when you pre-approve buyers. Again, we are talking with Bill Sandvig of Movement Mortgage. If you have any questions, we've got about 5 minutes left, 843-556-1250. We are live in the studio. But what I wanted to say, Bill, is that Movement Mortgage does something that is incredibly unique and I think needed in a market like this. Tell us very quickly, just a few seconds, what you do in your pre-approval process and how your pre-approval is different from, let's say, a Wells Fargo approval.
Sure. So that goes right into that third bullet point, which is how fast can you get me my money? So when a person goes to get a pre-qualification, they're looking to how much can I buy? Can I get this house? So there's a couple of levels there. There can be a quick cursory phone call with a loan officer, and you're just basically taking the person's word about what their income is, and after a conversation, you can say, yeah, so it sounds like you could buy a house. And I could type up a letter. That'd be horrible. I mean, that is based on the borrower's opinion of what they can do. So that's worth nothing. The next one would be to pull a credit report and then just do a cursory check. They told me how much they earned. I've got a credit report. Credit's good. You've got a buyer.
Pre-qualification, right?
Right. So that's a pre-qualification. Now, what we want to do is we want to get a full picture of that borrower. We want to get the income, the asset documentation, and we're going to take that stuff and we're actually going to send it into underwriting. We're going to send it into underwriting, and in less than 24 hours, my company is going to get you a borrower that has been approved through underwriting. Now, the letter that I can write, that pre-qualification letter, is completely different than what another lender could write, because instead of having a pre-qualification, we have a pre-approval. An approved borrower. Now we are past the point of needing to collect documents, and we can close loans faster.
Right.
So because we have the credit done, all we're worried about is the house now. We just need an appraisal. We need to do an inspection. When that's done, we match that up with a qualified, approved borrower, and we could close a house in 15 days.
Right.
That's leverage.
It's leverage.
And so the important thing to hear when listening to this is that there's a pre-approval letter that says you're pre-approved for mortgage, but they still have to review all of the documents. But what Bill is saying is that you can have a letter stating not only are you pre-approved, they've already been through the underwriting process. There's no hiccups there.
Exactly.
And that's
right.
a very exciting thing to be able to convey to a seller when representing a buyer in a multiple offer situation.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, we are out of time. We'll be live in the studio in the next week or two. We would love to take some more questions, help some more people. And again, if there's anything that we can do to help, please go to my website, www.listingsincharleston.com. And on that site, guys, my promise to you is that by this time next week, you will have your contact information up there so that people can go to one source and get everything they need. So thank you all very much for tuning in. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Join Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning from 8 till 9. Contact Brian Beatty online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-345-1273. 843-345-1273.